For those of you that are new tonight, let me just tell you that this is a brand new Bible study that I'm working on. Somebody asked me a little earlier if if there was a book for this course. Well, there will be as soon as I get it written and published. So it's on its way. So you are hearing fresh material. The only people that have heard this material so far is my focus group. And that's a group of ladies that I teach. It's a non-denominational Bible study at Dr. Phillips YMCA. And they have just been wonderful, and it's a great group. And so they have been delightful in helping me and listening and all like that. So basically they are the only ones that sort of know where it's all headed, and they haven't even heard all the lessons. They're going to hear a new one tomorrow morning, as a matter of fact. So at any rate, I am delighted that you are joining us. This particular study is going to be on the extravagance of God's love. And I'm calling it Extravagance Unveiled. And there will be a lesson, in fact I'm working on it now, on the veil that was in the tabernacle and the temple. Some of the history of that and what happened to that. And so we may get to that one during the course of this study. This is a little different from the other two Bible studies that I've done in that the other two are sequential. In other words, you take a lesson and then you build on that lesson on the next lesson. In this case, though, each one of these sessions could be standalone, because I'm going to look at a specific one or two verses or short passage in each session. And each session will deal with some aspect of God's love, some aspect that helps us learn what are some of the elements that are within His love, the extravagant nature of that. Last week I shared a story about a young woman who was at my house, and sort of through some events that happened as I was praying after she left my home. I was praying, and it seemed to me that God was saying to me, speaking this into my heart, you do not understand the extravagance of my love, even for one person. I know last week we talked about John 3:16, that very first verse, for God so loved the world. And of course He does, the entire world, everyone in the world. But He is also so in love with us as individuals, the one-on-one. The little saying that many of you have heard, He loves each of us as if there were only one of us. So tonight, the place that we're going to start has to do with His commitment to His Word. And the reason that is important when we study about the nature of God's love is because anybody can say they love you. But if there's not commitment behind those words, then that's all they are. They're just words. There's nothing to back up the word. So we're going to let this be the foundation upon which all the rest of the information that we're going to learn about the various aspects of His love, we're going to let it rest. We're going to start with this being sort of the foundation where it comes from. And we will start with, tonight, we're going to be looking at Jeremiah, if you'd like to turn to that, chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. And I'm going to read them, and then we'll start going through, actually word by word is how we're going to study this. It's going to be very in-depth on these two verses. And I want to tell you in advance that these two verses have become two of my absolute favorite verses. In fact, it's more than that. I've become so enamored, so overwhelmed by these two verses that I cling to them. And I pray, my prayer for all of you tonight is just that you will also feel that way about these two verses when you there's some. Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Jeremiah, what do you see? And I said, I see an almond branch. Then the Lord said to me, you have seen well, for I'm watching over my word to perform it. Now, at first blush, that doesn't have the, or at least it did not for me, the immediate profound effect that a verse that I'm more familiar with has, like John 3:16, or some verse from Philippians, or he is in all things and he holds all things together, Colossians 1:17. But when you see what is in this verse, I pray that God will just let it penetrate your heart. It is two of the most magnificent verses that we have in the Old Testament. If within the two verses we have a question, and then we have a promise. A question and then a promise. A question from the Lord and then a promise from Him. And sandwiched in between the question and the promise is this magnificent image of almond trees. This magnificent image of almond trees. And that's why you have your little almonds tonight. So that's just a little. If you will, let's see, do I need to do this, Jim? I've got it, okay. All right. We're going to hope now that tonight this just works beautifully. Okay. This is called the Lesson of the Almond Tree. And we're going to start tonight, I've actually changed this, extravagantly committed. Okay? There is diligence here, but it's really commitment, extravagant commitment. And we're going to talk just a little bit to begin with about almond trees. Are they not magnificent? I didn't know too much about, aren't they gorgeous? I did not know too much about almond trees until I began studying the history of these. It is thought that they actually were cultivated initially thousands of years ago in China. But because of the conditions, the climatic conditions and the soil conditions and the fertility of the Levant, they are really considered native. So it is considered a native tree to Israel, to Syria, to Lebanon, all that area in the Eastern Mediterranean, and in fact, Italy as well. Now, they could grow in Florida. It's just, it would have to be from about Orlando south. But ironically, there are not many almond groves in the state of Florida. In fact, very, very few. I don't know of any. Primarily, the almond groves are in the San Joaquin Valley in California. And what's interesting about that is that California produces 80 to 90% of the world's almond. California produces 100% of the United States consumption of almonds, okay? So all up and down the San Joaquin Valley, you have these magnificent groves. Now, I'll tell you, I lived in California for a while. In fact, I graduated from college from the University of California at Davis, which is up north outside of Sacramento. And I probably saw down further south, I probably saw almond trees, but you know, normally if they're on farms, they're sort of off, you know, the major highways, they're sort of, you know, back in the fields and all. And so I really never really saw that many of them, but evidently the San Joaquin Valley is covered with almond groves. Let me show you just another. I just thought this, look how beautiful this is. And this is where I actually purchased a slide that, on that first slide, you know, with the white gloss, that is an almond branch. I purchased that slide so that I could use it for my DVD presentations, and when I go to send this off to a publisher, I will use those images because they're so beautiful. But you can see that the blossoms remind you of peach or pear. If you, we see a lot of that on our way up through Georgia and even up into South Carolina, North Carolina, that there is a similarity to the peach and the pear blossom. Now, I bought these artificial stems over there, and it said on them, I looked everywhere for almond blossom, artificial almond blossom. You just can't find them. But those are peach, so I just thought, well, I'll just get the peach and tell my class there is a difference in them. So, at any rate, this is what the almond flower looks like. And let me show you just one more slide. This is what is so wonderful about them. They can be all kinds of shades of bright white to even a softer white. They can have that bright pink throat inside the blossom, or they can be all different kinds of shades of pink. Light pink, medium pink, dark pink, so that there are a variety of colors for the blossom. Unlike a lot of fruit trees, the almond tree must be cross-pollinated. You know what that means? That means that bees have to be involved. And as I was doing my study, what makes this so interesting is that every February and March into California is the largest migration of beekeepers with their bees in the world. So they come in from not just California, but they come in from other surrounding states. They load up their bees, they bring them to the groves, and they just allow the bees then to pollinate. You've probably read in different places that, you know, there's a lot of information and talk among scientists about the diminishing bee population. You know, you've probably read that they think that it may have something to do with microwaves, with our satellite, with the waves, you know, that we use for so many of our towers and different things. They're not really sure. But they do know that the bee population is diminishing. The growers in California are literally spending millions of dollars two different ways. One, to find out why the bees, because if they go, then the almond trees go. The second place that they are doing research is to create an almond tree that does not require cross-pollination. The only problem is the nuts are not as tasty. They're not quite as tasty. So it's sort of good news, bad news. So there's a lot. It was fascinating, really, as I was beginning to read about this. I think I've got one more that I wanted to show you. This is interesting. You know, through even today, there's sort of a renewed interest in almond blossoms. It's interesting, and I'll just share you a little bit of the background. In Greek mythology, there is a legend in Greek mythology that there was a young woman who got to the altar. Her name was Priscilla, and her fiancé jilted her. And evidently the gods took pity on her and turned her into an almond tree, but one that was without leaves and without blossoms. When the fiancé returned and realized how devastated she was, how heartbroken, the legend says he embraced her and she burst into bloom. And so in secular society, the legend has always been, or the thinking has always been, that almond blossoms and almond trees represent hope or eternal springtime. And there has been this incredible resurgence just in the last year or two of people. This is the 2014 Dolce & Gabbana spring dress collection. And every dress had almond blossoms on them. In fact, you can see some of these are even in 3D. They actually cut, they had their tailors cut the blossoms, and they were actually like 3D blossoms. They did sunglasses, they did an incredible line of haute couture, and it was received in the fashion world as just, you know, absolutely spectacular. They also, on these runways, I don't know if you can see in the back, they brought in live almond trees in full bloom and lined the runways. This is just 6 months ago. Lined the runways with those, okay? So it really has been a resurgence. Now, 1890, and I ordered this offline, so I've actually got this, and I'm going to frame this when yes, if you just will help me with this. This is beautiful. This is a canvas. Vincent van Gogh, in the 1800s, did an entire series of almond blossoms because it represented hope to him. He had a brother named Theo who had a little boy that they were afraid was going to die at birth. And they named the little boy after Vincent. They named him Vincent. And so Van Gogh then went and did a whole series on almond blossoms, but with the idea of the hope that was involved. Thank you so much. He also did some of just branches in jars, and this is very interesting that so many artists through the years have been enamored with these beautiful blossoms, and just the whole idea of it meaning that the almond blossom stands for hope, has been through secular. Now, I want us to look, however, at where almonds are mentioned in the Bible, and let's see what we can glean from God's perspective about the almond tree and the almond blossom. So the very first time in the Bible that almonds are mentioned is in Genesis chapter 43 in verse 11. And here's the scene. Joseph has already been sold into slavery and then sort of was promoted in the society there in Egypt, in fact, to a position of leadership. You recall that story. And his brothers then come, and there is a time when the brothers actually meet him in the court there in Egypt. They don't recognize him. They don't know who he is. And he questions them, and he says, I want you to go back and bring your father back with you. And of course, they're frightened over it. And this scene is where they have come back, the brothers have come back to their father, who is Israel. And this is what he says to them, chapter 43, verse 11. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags and carry a present down to the man, of course, being Joseph. A little balm and a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. So almonds, we know from this, was considered a choice fruit, a prized fruit, one that people loved to eat. And in fact, we've got lots of information that shows how almonds, even as early as 2000 BC, were being utilized in bakery goods in Egypt. Sometimes they would be ground to a paste, ground to a powder, yes, and used in the flour. As early as 1200 BC now, you could actually walk the streets in Egypt and go to a stall, a bakery stall, and buy a loaf of bread or buy rolls or buy a treat, some kind of a treat. So almonds were already being used in sauces. They were being used to flavor breads, baked goods, all different kinds of things. And I suspect almonds were also used as we like to eat them, just like the ones that you've got in your little cup there. Now, I did include some Jordan almonds that are candy coated. I don't think they did that to them, but you will enjoy just trying those, okay? All right, that's the end of it. I thought I had one more. Let me see if I can go back. That's going to be our next lesson, but let me. Well, that's okay. You've got the image of those almonds anyway in your mind, all right? Now, let's go to, and I'm saving out one final characteristic of the almond tree that I'm going to wait and tell you what it is when we start really digging down into our verse for tonight. Almonds are only mentioned about 4 or 5 times in all of Scripture, okay? However, the 2 other times that they are mentioned, color the entire Bible. Okay, the image is so important, the way that it's used, that it is so significant that it actually penetrates all the other scripture verses. So I want to show you where the second time that we see the mention of almonds is. In Exodus 25, beginning in verse 31. All right, and those of you that have taken my course on the tabernacle and temple, the house, the one that's called the house, will remember these verses. God is giving Moses directions for all the things that he wants created and made for the tabernacle. Okay, he's, we talked about in threads, we talked about when Moses went up on the mountaintop, he brought the 10 Commandments back in dress patterns. You remember that for the priest? Well, he also brought back architectural drawings, plans for the tabernacle, and also furniture designs. All right, so in verse 31, you see God's directions. You shall make a lampstand of pure gold. The lampstand shall be of hammered work. Its base, its stem, its cups, its calyxes, and its flowers shall be of one piece with it. And there shall be 6 branches going out of its sides, 3 branches of the lampstand out of one side of it, and 3 branches of the lampstand out of the other side of it. 3 cups made like almond blossoms, each calyx and flower on one branch, and 3 cups made like almond blossoms, each with a calyx and flower on the other branch. So for the 6 branches going out of the lampstand. And on the lampstand itself there shall be 4 cups made like almond blossoms, with their calyxes and flowers, and a calyx of one piece with it under each pair of the 6 branches going out from the lampstand. The calyxes and their branches shall be of one piece with it, the whole of it a single piece of hammered work of pure gold. You shall make the 7 lamps for it, and the lamps shall be set up, and so on and so forth. This lampstand, I'm going to see if you can just put the backwards, just point it and see if we can get it back to a picture of the almonds and don't worry if you can't, just try it and see. All right, so the only light in the tabernacle came from this lampstand. When Solomon built the temple, he made 10 lampstands exactly like this. Okay? 5 down one side of the holy place and 5 down the other. Yeah, one more. There we go. You can just hold it right there if it'll hold. What is so interesting is that God chose a petal. And you remember, oh, this is perfect. Leave it right here. You'll see that there are, if you could, we're up here closely, there are only 5 petals. And if you were to fold those up, they would make a perfect little receptacle to hold the oil and to hold the wick for the lampstand. And so God takes this image and transposes it into this very, very important piece in the tabernacle and all through the centuries of the temple. In fact, this was the only light other than Shekinah, other than God's own light that lit up the Holy of Holies. This was the only light coming out of the tabernacle and the temple, the only kind of light. And what a beautiful, can you imagine what those lampstands must have looked like with those beautiful blossoms and the oil, the olive oil, pure beaten olive oil in them, and the wicks that they would light, keep trimmed. They had to be burning and lit 24/7. So the priests were always working on them, okay? Now, let's go to the next place that we see almonds, and now you'll see why. Even though the almond blossom, the almond tree is only mentioned a couple of times in Scripture, you see right there from the fact that they form the design for the lampstands that did the light all those centuries through the tabernacle and all those centuries through the temple. It was the almond blossom, okay? Now, let's go to Numbers chapter 17. And this is a very interesting situation. Here's what's happened. The Israelites are sort of in open rebellion right now against Moses' leadership, but they are particularly incensed over Aaron being chosen as the high priest. And one of the questions that the leaders is saying is, well, why can't we have somebody else? You know, why does it have to be Aaron? I mean, but he's your brother. Does it have to be him? Can't we choose somebody else? And so here's what is said. Verse 1, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel and get from them staffs, in other words, a branch. One for each father's house, from all of their chiefs according to their father's houses, 12 staffs. Write each man's name on his staff, and write Aaron's name on the staff of Levi. For there shall be one staff for the head of each father's house. Then you shall deposit them in the tent of meeting, in the tabernacle, before the testimony, which was the Ten Commandments, where I meet with you, and also the Ark of the Covenant. And the staff of the man whom I choose shall sprout. Thus I will make out to cease from me the grumblings of the people of Israel, which they grumble against you. Moses spoke to the people of Israel, and all the chiefs gave him staffs, one for each chief according to their father's houses, 12 staffs. And the staff of Aaron was among their staffs. And Moses deposited the staffs, in other words, these are branches that they've gone out and collected, before the Lord in the tent of the testimony. On the next day, Moses went into the tent of the testimony, and behold, the staff of Aaron for the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds and produced blossoms, and it bore ripe almonds. Then Moses brought out all the staffs from before the Lord to all the people of Israel, and they looked, and each man took his staff. And the Lord said to Moses, put back the staff of Aaron before the testimony to be kept as a sign for the rebels, that you may make an end of their grumblings against me, lest they die. Thus did Moses, as the Lord commanded him, so he did. There were 3 things that they kept in the Ark of the Covenant, all those centuries and centuries. They kept the stone tablets with the 10 Commandments. They kept a small jar that had an omer of manna to remind them of God's provision in the desert. And they kept this staff that had budded and blossomed overnight, that was an almond branch down inside the Ark of the Covenant. And from that time forward, God says, not just a legend about hope, he says the almond blossom and tree will stand for my divine authority. I find that so interesting. When I saw that Dolce & Gabbana, all of those beautiful models with those beautiful dresses, and I'm thinking to myself, they have really no idea that the Bible says that what the almond blossom really stands for, the branch, is His authority. His divine authority. Is that not interesting? It's just
your hubby now knows what to get you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Except you know what they, these are, thousands and thousands of dollars. But it is so interesting to me that there has been such a resurgence of interest in the almond blossom. So interesting, okay? So from this point forward now, it is a major symbol among the Jews, a major symbol among the Israelites.